Today we're in the lowbrow fishing cave, preparing for another trip out on the water. And we're talking about my secret 1-2 punch when it comes to pre-spawn and spring fishing. You don't want to miss this one. Stick around. And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have your chance to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to lowbrow fishing. And for a change of pace, I figured I'd do this one from the lowbrow fishing man cave. It's kind of a torrential rain outside, but tomorrow it's supposed to be really nice, and I'm going to take advantage of that weather and I'm going to get out on the water. But right now, I'm rigging up what I want to use, what I want to throw. And I have a very specific pattern in mind, a very specific method that has been really working out well for me for the past few weeks, as it has each and every year since I started on this. Kind of hesitant to give this away, but there's a key here. If you can find a certain type of spot on the water, which really isn't that hard, especially in a man-made impoundment, natural lakes might be a little bit more difficult, but if you're anywhere near a man-made impoundment, something like this will really be key, and it'll give you access to both pre-spawn, spawning, and post-spawn fish. The trifecta, as it were. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be using a two-step process that's going to help us target those fish in all three phases. Now, first and foremost, what are we looking for when we're heading out onto the water? What type of place am I talking about that's so special? We're using Google Earth. We're going to zoom in to this spot right here on the big lake. Now, if you've been watching the videos lately, you'll notice that I've been taking the little boat out into this exact area. Now, what do you see here? Well, you see 3 branching creek arms by this old boat ramp, and in the middle is this open area, this more deep area. Now, what we have here is we have fish that are staging in this deeper area, and we have fish that are moving back into these 3 arms here, and they're looking to spawn, or they've already spawned and they're getting ready to head back out into the main lake. So by fishing this small area, we can cover 3 types of fish, and we can do it very effectively with only 2 types of presentations. So when I say 1-2 punch, what exactly am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about fishing the open, deeper area with more power baits, and we'll get into what types of baits and colors and patterns that I'm talking about, and then moving up and fishing those creek arms in a completely different way. But in actuality, we're only going to really be using 2 types of presentations. We're going to be using something like a crankbait or spinnerbait, and then we'll be using a finesse presentation like a wacky rig or a hover rig or a Texas rig worm. So when I say 1-2 punch, I'm talking about being able to fish multiple places in the water column, and I can fish out deep and I can fish up shallow, but I only need 1 or 2 presentations in order to do that. I can use one power fishing presentation, such as a square bill or a spinnerbait, and then I can switch up and then use a finesse presentation up shallow. And that's really all I need. That's all I've been using, that's all I've been doing, and that's really what's been working. A lot of guys are telling you right now about the crawfish bite. You need to be throwing red. You need to be throwing something loud. A fritz sight in a crawfish color is a great thing. Some sort of silent running square bill or silent lipless, or even any type of lipless for that matter, is a great way to get those fish excited because they're feeding up on craw before they go to spawn. Well, in the springtime, there's another very important pattern that is often overlooked because most anglers are busy throwing red and chasing craw, and that is bluegill and sunfish patterns. These are very, very important because, as we know, for most of the year, the bluegill and the sunfish, well, they're getting the short end of the stick. The bass chase and eat them. But when the bass are on bed spawning, well, that's when those bluegill, that's when they sort of turn the tables on those bass, and they get in there and they eat the bass eggs, or they eat those fry whenever they get a chance. the bass are very amped up about those bluegill. They tend to become very aggressive whenever they see bluegill in the area, and they'll start chasing them away. A lot of times, if you're bed fishing, you'll notice if you throw a worm, stick bait, or whatever on a bass bed, a lot of times they'll just pick it up with their mouth, move it over to the side, and they'll drop it. But if you use something that mimics a bluegill, a lot of times you will get a more active, a more fierce strike. And that is because those bass, well, they know what those bluegill are there for, and they're not playing around. So this obviously is a frit side. I'm using this for a little bit deeper water, and this is something that those bass are really keyed and activated on whenever it comes to springtime fishing. Now, when I say a two-step approach, what am I doing? Well, whenever I'm out in the deeper water, I'm targeting those pre-spawned fish. I'm targeting those fish that are actually getting ready to go up on bed. And I'm also targeting those few post-spawned fish that have already spawned, those females that have already spawned, and they're coming off of those bed, and they're getting ready to stage up before they head back into the main lake. Now, what I'm doing in that area is I'm actually throwing a spinnerbait, especially something in a bluegill pattern. And tomorrow's supposed to be cloudy, got some overcast. I'm going to be throwing some gold blades. And again, those bass right now are very keyed in. It doesn't matter if they're on the bed. They're still very keyed in on that bluegill pattern. At least in my lakes, in the lakes that I fish in the springtime, that's how it is. So I'm using that open area to fish. That's where I'm starting. I'm working from the middle out, and I'm fan casting. And when I'm using a bluegill type pattern, well, that's when I'm catching those big girls. And it doesn't just apply to something like a spinnerbait, although that is mainly what I am focused on when I'm fishing that deeper water. Another type of bait, obviously, is the frit side. If I'm fishing in water that's 8, 10, 12, 14 feet deep, I'm going to be throwing something like this. On the other hand, I might be throwing something like this Berkeley Pitbull here too. Obviously, this is in a bluegill sunfish pattern, and that's really the pattern that I'm really focused on now. Now, you guys know that I'm not really one for matching the hatch per se, but that doesn't mean that I throw any random color. I throw colors with determination. There are things that I do have in mind, that I do have a plan with, and focusing on trying to trick those bass into aggressively striking something they think is a bluegill, that they think is a threat, then especially in the spring, then that's something I'm going to go with. If you've been watching the past videos, you've seen that I've been throwing this orange colored worm quite a lot. And these are ones that I make myself, but whether I've got them Texas rigged, whether I've got them on the hover rig, whatever, I'm getting really hammered with these. It's really been a great bite. And the reason being is because that flash of orange, it triggers those bass. They see bluegill, and that's all they care about. They need to eliminate it, and they need to do it as quickly as they can. So whenever I'm fishing something more shallow, up under the brush, pitching back into those spawning beds or those pockets where the water is quite a bit more shallow, I'm going with something like a plastic worm, where I can use this to entice those bass into thinking there's bluegill in the area, there's a threat to the area, and they don't play around. They generally don't try to pick up the tail on this and walk away with it. They will actually try to inhale it, to slurp it, to get rid of it. And whenever you're bed fishing, a lot of times, especially when you're sight fishing, that's the key. Because a lot of times, you throw a green pumpkin worm, you throw a June bug worm or whatever, and it may elicit a response from those bass. They'll pick it up and they'll drop it to the side. But this, I rarely get that. Most of the time, they're hitting this like they're trying to eat it. And that's what I'm after. That's what I'm looking for. Another presentation that I'm using, obviously I've talked about recently, is the stupid tube. But you can see here that I've got this dyed with some merthiolate. Again, we're going with that bluegill representation. So this can actually be worked in both phases. When I'm fishing that deeper open area, I can actually work this tube and I can get some responses that way. But I can also keep this tied on because I've got it rigged weedless on a shaky head. I can use this up under those brush. I can use this in a lot more shallow water and still use this sort of to bed fish or trick those bass into thinking bluegill in the area, and I get that more aggressive response. So that's basically what we're talking about. When we're talking about a two-step approach, we're talking about working that deeper water with a deeper, quicker, more power fishing sort of presentation in a bluegill pattern, something like a square bill or a crankbait or a spinnerbait, which is something that's been working quite effectively for me. And then the next part being is whenever we move up shallow, we switch to a worm or a stupid tube or a wacky rig or whatever, something a little bit more finesse, so we can really work up under that brush and get up close to those bass who were sitting in the real shallow water. Now, this is a great pattern that's worked for me for many years, and I'm sure it's going to work for you too. So there you have it, my secret 1-2 punch for fishing the pre-spawn, then the post-spawn, and all throughout spring. If you can find the right conditions, you can exploit them, and I know you'll have great success. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.